March 2016 update. Are you happy to continue with that? I've asked for Mr. Caudle. I've been... So Andrew's not available, is that what I'm hearing? If you'd rather have him here, if you guys could wait for... Let's do it. Okay. Okay. We're chasing Heath at the moment, aren't we? Yeah, okay. Anyway, so where are we? Page 31. Right.
Chairman, I think we may as well just go directly to questions. I think it's all fairly straightforward.
And there will be a few, I'm sure. Councillor Bevan.
Yes, I've got several questions. Firstly, you're aware, Andy, that we're going to public consultation with the, in principle, purchase of environmental flows. And this might change because we haven't got the final version of the consultation. But there are three options, as I understand it. One is take no water. Two is take the water as per the concession deed, and the third is buy the water as per the in principle decision that the council made months ago. Can you confirm, looking at that document, it says that if it's via the current concession deed, which is the council buying the flows on an annual, determining how much they want and buying it on an annual basis, the consultation deed says that the water will be purchased at the spot price. That's what the consultation document says. But your letter to us on the 16th of February says something completely different. It says that we will buy at the foundation water user price. Can you clarify that we've got this document for consultation wrong or right?
So you're testing my memory. It would have been helpful to have had notice of this question, but my recollection, I have to say, is that the last version of the concession deed has the water at the foundation water user price with whatever increases in price and index changes that would have occurred between when the document is signed, you know, and so on. So I think it's at the foundation water user price.
Let me just confirm that by reading the piece from HBRIC's letter to us, which says HBRC has an option but no obligation to purchase up to 4 million cubic metres per annum at the infrastructure charge in the foundation water user agreements, i.e. 23 cents escalated at CPI. So I think we will need to have another look at our document because it specifically says at the spot price, and you've just confirmed that that's not correct.
Well, I suggest that you ask your legal advisors or somebody to have a look at the document to be absolutely certain. But I think between what you've just read out and my recollection, it is at the foundation water user price.
So I've got several more questions. I'll just ask one more and then we can come back to some of the others. Okay, so thinking about the various tranches of water that will fall out of the dam, and I made a list of them. Firstly, there's the water that maintains the flow into the Makarora River. Secondly, there's the flushing flows, the 4 million cubic metres of flushing flows. And thirdly, there's the 4 million cubic metres of environmental flows that we've just talked about. So call both of those 4 million, 8 million of environmental flows. Then there's the foundation water contracts. Then there's subsequent water users that sign up after the construction starts, and then there's spot sales of water. So there's actually a number of different tranches of water. Let's say in the first year of operation of the dam, it doesn't fill up and we only get 30 million cubic metres of water, and somebody is going to have to make choices about who gets supplied and who doesn't get supplied. I want to understand the hierarchy of priorities for supply of water. Can you confirm with me that the first priority will be the flow in the Makarora, and that the second priority will be the environmental flows that are provided to the Hawke's Bay Regional Council?
So the priorities are set out in the concession deed,
Yeah.
and you could read those there any
I'm
time
asking
you
you
like.
to tell me so that we have it on public record here.
I believe the concession deed's a matter of public record, but in any case,
Yes.
my understand.
No, well, it doesn't matter. We're going to get the answer.
So once again, you're asking me to tell you something that is stored in my head without having given me any advance notice to read a document.
My apologies. You've got a pretty good head, though.
Nonetheless, you're asking me to do something that you, or potentially other people, will say, Andy Pearce said this as a matter of fact. I'm conditioning that to say that I'm giving you this from my memory,
Yeah.
and I don't guarantee that it's 100% absolutely accurate. All right? I think that's fair given the nature of the question. So the concession deed sets safety flows, environmental flows as the first, and environmental flows as the first priority. And there's a fairly wide-ranging definition of environmental flows, which includes the minimum flow into the Makarora, 1.2 odd QMX, which is 50 million odd cubic metres a year. The 4 million cubic metres of flushing flows. In the concession deed as previously drafted, the HBRC flows, I believe, were included in that. Flows which have to be released for the purposes of public safety, unspecified as to volume or timing, are included in the same priority. And I believe that not included in your list, the flows that need to be released when minimum flows are reached at a number of locations in the river to protect other users' existing rights are included in that same priority. They're quite a small quantity of water, a million cubic metres or maybe even less than that. And then contracted water, which is the foundation water user agreements, and then any other contracts up to a maximum of 104 it was originally, and it's now 105 point something, to provide for including the proposed water contract by Central Hawke's Bay District Council in the contracted flows are the next priority. So all of those flows are the next priority, and then spot water is the last priority.
No, I've got some more questions, but there will be others, so.
Right, other questions? Councillor Graham.
Do it one at a time, are we?
Oh, whatever. You've got 10 as well, have you? Or?
No, I've got 10. Andrew, you may be the one to answer this. The bank debt, just remind me, this not the CIL debt, but the bank debt. What amount is that?
Oh, I'm not disclosing that until such time as we disclose the capital. We're not disclosing that until such time as we've negotiated the deals with the bank. It's got locked and loaded.
Okay, that's fine. Have we ever been told that even in I don't recall that figure.
Yes, you have.
We have been recalled. Okay.
Yep.
The other question I have, so we're now saying 41 million is of cubic these waters required. Where are we at? Where's the status today?
So 45 million cubic metres of water. As you'll be aware, I'm sure, we've as a consequence of moving the water price, all of those contracts effectively went back on the table. So we've issued contracts in excess of 40 million cubic metres of water, and that's the number that we expect to achieve by the 18th of April, and they are flowing in now. I'm not going to give you numbers now because the only date that actually matters in this argument from this point onwards is the 18th of April. But if you want a assessment of where I think the number's going to end up, probably by about the second week of April, it'll be something in the order of north of 40 million cubic metres, and it'll probably be slightly short of 45. So we're going to end up in a conversation with our customers around how do we bridge that gap.
Okay, well, thanks for that honesty and that argument. I've got another question, but certainly you can. No, I appreciate the frankness of that. Just on that McFarlane report, just flicked out the quarterly update, and they're still saying, McFarlane's still saying 35% dairying. I think that was 9,000 hectares, 8,000 hectares on light country. And what's your thought on that as an economic activity underpinning this project?
Oh, dairy's just, well, I'll give you quite a rounded answer here actually, and I'll start by making the point that this is a 70-year project, and I would expect in the 70-year period the types of land uses will evolve, change and migrate probably at least 2, probably 3 times or possibly even more, including dairy in that period of time. The second point I'll make is that, as we all know, commodity prices for primary produce rise and fall in cycles. We're seeing dairy in an extended cycle right now, and I'll come back to the forecasting numbers that McFarlane's used and some of the national basis for those in a moment. But having said that, so the work that MRB did, and they used AgFirst for the horticulture numbers here locally, and in turn they also used Baker Ag, who are the primary dairy consultants for farmers in the East Coast and North Island. So it wasn't just a Canterbury exercise, but in terms of the dairy numbers and the mix of land uses that are indicated there, and the proportion, essentially what McFarlane and those other parties are saying is that if you look forward, really over a period of years, it could be 10, 20, 30 years, it's reasonable to expect a third of the area will be in dairy. And I might add that both the commodity price milk solids number used and the sensitivities applied were exactly the same numbers and sensitivities applied by the Reserve Bank for its assessment of impaired debt in the dairy sector around the Trading Bank assessment. So those are nationally benchmarked to utilise numbers. They're not overstated, and they're reasonably robust, but reality will be reality just like it was for various other land uses 4 years ago, in a different profile. So dairy's a viable land use there, and there will be dairy.
You're saying Treasury's at $6.50
no,
as well?
No, if you look at the numbers, McFarlane's used two numbers. He's used $6 per kg of milk solid, and he's used $5.50 actually. And he's made the assumption that those are the numbers prevailing at 1920. That's 3 to 4 years from here. 1920.
2019,
2020.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. No, there was probably actually
to the future.
Dare I say, Councillor Barker, there would have been dairy farms on the Heratonga Plains at that point. I can assure you.
Councillor Hewitt.
Thanks, Chair. I think my question is possibly for you, Andrew, but maybe Andy may wish to comment. With regard to the public interest in this project, I'm wondering what was the response to the approach to Forest and Bird to try and expedite things at the point we're at in time? That's my first part to my question. And my second part is, given that we don't need that land that's under discussion for 3 years, are you concerned about what's going on, and are there any other avenues that you might be looking at to sort that land out?
You want me to talk about it broadly? Best I do.
Why don't you start and I'll see if there's anything on.
Yeah, fine. Okay. Well, certainly. So, as I think it's reasonably, people around, at least some people around this table are reasonably well aware, we did I produced a draft affidavit which was sent to Forest and Bird, and the affidavit was around urgency in the Supreme Court. And I have a feeling that that document got circulated slightly more broadly. And the answer at that point It was draft, has since been developed a wee bit further, was not interested in urgency. So that's the forest and bird approach. We expect another round of that particular question by this Friday, and we'll see what the answer is. I guess, having said that though, Crown Law acting on behalf of the Department of Conservation is in the same camp that we are around urgency. So that's the answer to that one. In terms of broader ways of doing the deal, there are a number of different ways that land exchange can be affected using different legislation. I'm not going to go into the detail of that here, but the position that we're taking is that we've achieved enough clarity out of the High Court decision to be confident that the Conservation Act route will deliver the land in a manner that we need it in due course. Okay.
I'll come back to you, Councillor Belvin.
Yeah, I just would like to clarify what the public information status is of a number of items that we're discussing here, because we have discussions with you in a variety of different settings, and it's not always clear what is intended to be public or not. Andy, you made a comment earlier that you seem to have assumed that the concession deed was public. It was discussed with us as a public excluded item. Would it be your view now that the concession deed can be made public?
So I'm not aware that it's ever been discussed with you as a public excluded item. The first conversation that I recall was in a workshop, but whether it's a public document or not is more a matter for the Chief Executive, I think, to describe, since it's actually a council document.
Well, then perhaps could I clarify for you? The draft concession deed, and you have seen a copy of that in I can't remember, is it a public excluded paper or a workshop, so that is not available publicly. What has been discussed publicly was the draft term sheets for the concession deed, and that was gone through in quite some detail back in 2014, I think. Yes, 2014. So, so the detail or the list of items and what was to be covered by the concession deed was considered in public. So that is available publicly.
So continues to be our view then that the concession deed is not a public document?
Correct, and if I could just clarify, so it's not yet come back to council for finalisation, but I intend to do that in the very near future. And again, I think that I haven't decided that yet, but I think it would have to be considered at that point in public excluded. But once you've, because it's subject to negotiation with both HBRIC and the other investor, which is the reason for its potential public exclusion. But once it's gone through that process, it would then be available publicly.
Okay, I disagree with that, but nevertheless. Number two would be, there's a reference here to the map outlining the proposed expanded distribution area will be tabled at the meeting. Are we getting that map today?
Right here.
Thank you. Number three, we discovered indirectly that you were communicating a pricing change and perhaps other changes to farmers in a letter that went out on March 4th to presumably a fair number of folks in Central Hawke's Bay. It would have included a revised water user agreement. I guess I'm unclear as to why we would not, as councillors, be alerted to that and have a copy of the whatever the existing now water user agreement is. Because one of the things you're asking us to do in this water purchase is to implement that through signing a water user agreement. And so somewhere along the line, it would seem to me we should be seeing what the current water user agreement is, should we not?
I'll ask Andrew to answer the question about the letter to the farmers, and then we'll discuss the second half of the question.
Okay.
Thanks, Ian. Yeah, so the letter to the farmers, clearly the primary party in relation to the water user agreement is between HBRIC, effectively representing the investors, and the farmers. And that letter was sent to those parties who had either contracted water and or were sitting in a contracting pipeline with a term sheet. It wasn't sent to anybody else. It was a direct communication with the customer, and now good business practice always says that you communicate with your customer first, not anybody else. So that was a private correspondence in effect with our customers. Somebody obviously saw it slightly differently, that's fine, but that's the process that was used.
Well, so still, weeks later, we have not been made privy to what the current water user agreement is.
So I guess do you want me to answer that one, Jim? Yep. My answer to that is, if and when the council decides or not decides to actually enter into a water user agreement, that's the time that you effectively become a customer of the scheme.
So
No, I think that's an unhelpful answer. Sorry, Andrew.
I mean, until then, we're to be blind as to what other changes you're considering as part of the water user
We've got an
agreement?
answer. We've got an answer coming.
So I think, given that the HBRC flows are intended to be under a bespoke foundation water user agreement, the vast quantity of which will be the same as the other, then it would be entirely appropriate for us to provide council now with that foundation water user agreement.
Well, I'd like you to do so.
Yep, and I undertake that we will.
Okay. Just rolling along in the same vein here, some farmers are proud to indicate that they are have contracted water, and somewhere in the documents we've seen in the past, we've been assured that at the point of agreeing to conditions precedent being met, there would be a, quote, certified list of farmers who have signed water user agreements with presumably some detail as to quantities and so forth. So what is the point at which actual farmers committed to this purchase will be disclosed?
So as part of your decision on the 25th of June in 2014, you, in Resolution 8.4, required to be delivered as together with the conditions precedent being met, a certificate issued by HBRIC's legal advisor summarising the terms of all executed water agreements, identifying the water user parties who executed the agreements, and explaining the enforceability or otherwise of the agreements. That's directly from your minutes. That when we bring you the documentation for meeting all of the terms and conditions precedent, you will get that information in a certificate from our legal advisors then.
Okay.
Can I also note, however, that it is up to the contracting party as to whether they have their name disclosed in public. That's privacy law, that's their choice. So what you rely on, as do other investors, is the due diligence process that is undertaken by Bell Gully.
But at some point, because they have to file farm environmental management plans and so forth, they're all going to be hanging out there publicly, as it were. So it's just a question of when, really?
That's considerably later, of course.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
I'll come back to you. We'll spread it around a bit because Peter's got more, but actually Councillor Dick had one as well. So.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think we've had quite adequate assurances from HBRIC, but I'd just ask you the question. Do we require the Port of Napier to disclose commercial agreements with its customers?
No. Councillor Bevan.
Thank you, Chair. I had a couple of questions around the water users agreement, but given we're going to have a look at it shortly, I'll park those. I want to just talk briefly about the 4 million cubic metres of flushing flows. And there are some suggestions that have arisen recently as to the effectiveness or not of such a device for improving the environmental health of the river. And the suggestion from scientists is that the impact of flushing flows is only felt in the first few kilometres downstream from the water release point. And of course, I think we're 60 kilometres to the mouth from the dam, I think. It's in that ballpark anyway. It's quite a long way, and what people who fish in that river tell me is that in the middle reaches it's actually quite shallow because of build-up of shingle and so forth, and there are effectively lakes through that middle section which would deaden the impact, if you like, of the flushing flows. So there are some doubts about whether the flushing flows are actually going to be effective in doing what we want them to do. So I've got a couple of questions around them. The first is that the water gets released in 4 1 million cubic metre bursts, but if I recall correctly, it's HBRIC who decides when that happens. Is that correct?
No. The last piece is not correct.
Okay.
If you were to read the conditions for the RWSS, you would discover that the clock starts ticking on the 1st of December. And if 21 days go by without a flow of a certain size, then a flow has to be released between then and 30 days. If there's a small fresh, it has to be piggybacked on that. I suggest if you want to understand this, then this happens. The clock gets reset when a flow is released.
Okay.
So if you should go and read the conditions, because once again you would be relying on my memory of quite a long chunk of the conditions for the RWSS. That's the best place to find out what it says.
Okay. So, well, for the purposes of this discussion, that's actually sufficient, because if we were to find in the first, I don't know, year or two after the water starts flowing that in fact these flushing flows don't have the desired impact in the lower reaches of the Tukitok, would it be possible to treat those 4 million cubic metres as part of the environmental flows, which might end up being 8 million, the 4 and the 4, and release them for environmental purposes in a different way?
You would have to go through whatever process is required to amend the consent conditions for the RWSS to have any effect whatsoever on the very specific conditions for the flushing flows. That's not to say that parties wouldn't be willing to have a sensible discussion, I'm sure, but you would have to go through a proper statutory process in order to do that.
A statutory process because it's a consent condition?
Because it's a consent condition.
Plan Change 6?
Consent condition variation process.
Not from Plan Change 6.
No, from the consent.
From the
Consents
specific
for the
consents for the RWSS.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That clears that point. One last question from me. If I recall back on the feasibility work that was supported by Tonkin and Taylor analysis, there was going to be something in the order of 180,000 cubic metres of water, of fill, shingle, whatever, that's going to start filling into the dam, into the reservoir. Is that correct? Yeah, probably. So 180,000 cubic metres a year. Is there any plan to remove any of that?
I'll deal with that. Yep. So what we've modelled what was done in Tonkin and Taylor's time actually, and was modelled in the feasibility point, was an inflow of gravels. It's high quality gravel that actually drops at the delta, what we call a delta. So that's the top end of the reservoir around Yeoman's Mill. That gravel does have it's quite a high quality aggregate material. And essentially what the feasibility study determined was a gravel infill period at the first 30 years, or the first key period of the operation of the dam under the consents, and assumed that infill ratio of 4 million cubic metres. What we have modelled is extracting 25% of that gravel in terms of saying there's a value there over that 30-year period. 25% will be removed, and the purpose of that is simply to really assess reliability alongside all the other hydrological characteristics of the dam.
Okay, so if 25% removed, we've still got 140 or something that's going to backfill. Yep. And I'm assuming that over the 35-year first consent period for this dam, you will have built in the lower storage capacity, especially towards the back end of that 35 years, in your modelling for income and so forth.
Yep.
Okay.
Councillor Hewitt, I'll be back.
Thank you. I was going to bring this up during our environmental flows discussion, but I think it would be particularly helpful here with the gentleman up the front. So I'm interested in you, Andy, just talking through the benefits of being a foundation water user as opposed to a later signatory to the water use.
So the Foundation Water User Agreement gives you a defined price path, essentially, including a starting point. In a previous discussion, I think the question was asked, so if you didn't do this before financial close, you know, what might happen? And there was speculation about whether, you know, the limited partnership would enter into an agreement with you on those terms and conditions, you know, if it was done soon afterwards. Well, clearly that's a negotiation that would have to be had with the limited partnership, but sensible parties, I think, would come to a sensible conclusion as long as, you know, and as long as that, if it were the bespoke water user agreement kind of arrangement that has been talked about, sensible parties on both sides would come to a view that it makes sense to do this on the same terms as if it had been done immediately prior to financial close. But I can't speak for those people. That's my view, that that's what would be a sensible outcome. But if you delayed by any length of time, a year or two, and then came back and said you wanted something different, then wanted a special water user arrangements, then you're in a different place with that group of people, and I think it would be a more difficult set of negotiations. Again, this is just my view of how things would be likely to play out, but that you're dealing with a commercial party at that point.
Can I? Oh, thank you. I was just going to see if you could tease out the aspects of the CPI versus, you know, you get to the 35 years and it has the reset, some of the benefits to the council as well.
Yeah, so basically the key issue is, well, one of the key issues, the many key issues. So broadly, the foundation water users, the first most important value the foundation water users get is certainty, right? It's really a certainty issue. And the most sensitive point, interestingly, is not what the actual starting water price actually is or isn't. It's how much certainty over a long period of time do they have about what the water price will be. So the key thing the Foundation Water User Agreement establishes is certainty, and it establishes that over 70 years. That's really the point around a CPI inflator. I mean, for example, there are other, and these are decisions that will be made way subsequent to with a different group, as Sandy's referred to, but the scheme may choose to inflate at a different rate. For example, it might use primary producers index, which is a different index. You can do those sorts of things. So post foundation water. So the key issue is certainty. Really is about as simple as that.
I think the other probably benefits of being a foundation water user for council, you would get a right of renewal at the end of the contract. So you know that the proposal is for 35 years. So you know, if that was taken up and then council decided it couldn't live without that water because of the range of benefits that it entailed, then it would have an automatic right of renewal for that, which I understand a post-foundation water user would not have. And I think there might be as well some, less likely for us, but certainly in terms of a foundation water user gets preferential treatment around transfer of water. So if we decided not to use it all, they would look at using their best endeavours to sell it rather than sell new water. So they sell it on our behalf. So another couple of little things. Most of the other benefits are probably things that aren't particularly relevant to council, around free connection points and and other sort of physical things like that, which because we're basically staying run of river, don't necessarily apply.
I think the last point to make in regard to your question, Councillor Hewitt, is that at the end of the first period, not only do you have the option to renew the contract, but you have the option to stick with the CPI inflator, or if undoubtedly, if there's an improved formula, you could choose not to go on the CPI inflator as well. But you have the ability to lock yourself in at that point to another CPI inflator for the next 35 years.
Osborne.
But I think in summary, the foundation water user, taking account of the quality of the supply, which is pressure, delivery, reliability, that sort of stuff, the price will never be beaten. That's the key thing we're trying to find, and the CPI is part of that component.
I was working down. I'll here and then I'll come down, work around the table.
Thank you. In the interest of accuracy and transparency, could we have a description of what term sheets actually means in relation to concession deed? And as the concession deed at the moment is still in draft, who is the concession deed actually negotiated between, and how much say does each party have? I'd like to know whether there could be changes in that draft.
So the concession deed is being, well, okay, well the term sheets that Liz referred to were, I'm not sure when they went, it was 2014, yeah, and that would have been around the time that the, I'd have to go back and dredge out my memory banks as to where that involved the previous investors, Ngāi and Trustpower, but the key point is that the concession deed and project agreement is an agreement ultimately between the council and the concession deed level and the institutional investor. So that's the other party, and the institutional investor is inside that concession deed and project agreement right now. So I expect we'll have a pretty good clear handle on their issues in the next matter of a day or two, such as they are.
Yep. So Andrew said with the co-investor, it's actually with the limited partnership, but obviously the co-investor is a key part of that negotiation.
Could the terms actually change either materially or?
I think you'll see clarity.
Or even in a minor manner?
I think you'll see clarity. Be my pick. It might be a slightly simpler document actually. Got a wee bit convoluted when we split. It used to be a concession deed only, then it became a concession deed and project agreement. I remember the conversation there. It's going to be a concession deed and project agreement, but I think you'll see clarity.
When the document was first written, the EPA process was still churning away, doing things. So there were a large number of references to potential outcomes of those and potential conditions and so on and so forth. So there's been some simplifying and clarifying and removal of those references, and in some places replacing them with the actual documentation and so on and so forth. But none of those are what I would call material changes. I have read the latest version, and other than items which we have discussed with this council early this year in a workshop session, as additional topics, one of those being the subject which is now in the public domain around replacing the HBRC, the previous HBRC flows with a foundation water user agreement, and the other is not yet in the public domain. Those are the only material changes that I'm aware of. Everything else is tweaks and refinements, and in some cases simplification and clarification.
Could we actually have term sheets as just so that we know we are talking about covering all the points in summary form?
Well, I think that's probably a matter for your council management to do, but we would obviously be happy to have an input into being clear about what's in that term sheet. I would suggest a way to do that would be to start with the previous term sheet. And
clarity, I want
yes,
to establish
and then show what's been changed.
What has already been discussed in public has been what is covered in the concession
yes,
deed through the discussion on the term sheet.
So we'll be happy to help with that.
Councillor Barker.
Thank you. I've got a clarification and 3 questions, or 3 different topics. I didn't quite hear the numbers when you spoke about the sign-ups. Could you just confirm for me that sign-ups on the new contract, you expect to get to about 40 million cubic metres, and the target is 45, and then you'll have a conversation about how to bridge the gap?
Yeah, to be slightly more precise, Councillor Barker, I expect we'll be sitting above 40 million cubic metres, somewhere in the middle, between 40 and 45, and consistent with these sorts of processes, I expect we'll be having a 11th hour discussion about how do we bridge that gap.
That's just what I want to
Yep.
clear. I
Yep.
thought that's what you said, something about it. I just want to be clear. Could I come to a... I'd like you to talk to me about the application by Forest and Bird, and I got from you that you were confident that this was going to be resolved. But the question I have for you, it seems to me this is fundamental to the project. We don't have the land, we can't fill it. So are we going to proceed on the basis of confidence that we've got this resolved, or certainty? So I think that there's quite a difference between the two, and I just want you to tell us how you see it, because I've got my own opinions, of course, about this.
So again, Councillor Barker, we have spoken with you about ways in which this might be resolved in public exclusion, because this is a matter clearly that relates to our litigation strategy. As Andrew has said, there are a number of alternatives. We will come to you, assuming that we do reach a point where we've satisfied all the conditions precedent. We will come to you with a clear proposition that explains how we will deal with that matter.
Can I just re-clarify? You seem to be thinking that I'm talking about the process to get there. I'm not. I'm asking the question about the end point. And so the end point is that we proceed on the basis of certainty about the outcome, not confidence that we'll get a good result. How we get to certainty is entirely another matter, but I just want to be clear that we're going to progress on this will be at certainty of the land.
You will see how we are going to deal with that when we come to that position.
All right. Two other issues. I see here that the Central Hawke's Bay District Council has yet to initiate a special consultative process. When did you expect them to start on that at the time this was taken? When do you expect them to start now with a revised thing? And do you expect them to start at all?
It's a fair range of questions there,
Councillor.
Three. If you could read
Let's
the
cut to the
Central
chase.
Hawke's Bay
It's not relevant
Yeah,
to whether
okay.
or not we hit the condition precedent of 45 million cubic metres.
I didn't say it was. I didn't say it was.
We're making a point.
No, I didn't say it was, but my question is still fair and legitimate. And I've asked you a fair question. What was your expectation about the consultation process to start?
We don't have a position.
We don't have a position. The Central Hawke's Bay District Council will have a position, and they're sitting there with a contract, which is what we call stage 5 of the pipeline. I've left them, or we have collectively left them to their own devices to figure out what they're going to do. But if you want a real answer around not a process-based answer, sooner or later they are going to have to resolve their bulk water supply issues, so they can't leave it forever.
But
that's the real issue.
Just a response to Mr. Robinson's interjection, I wasn't asking for us to give a description of what their position was. I was asking for HBRIC to give me a view about what their understanding was, which is quite different. I asked, what was your understanding about when they were going to do, if you had one, and has it moved? It didn't have one. Okay. The next question I have is to the additional borrowing. Noted February that drawdown increase approval council. First portion of this borrowing will be drawn down in March 2016. So we're very close to the end of March. Could you give us an update on what you've done with the borrowing to date?
Could we perhaps, were your questions financial? No. Okay, but a couple more questions and then we'll deal with the finances and then we'll wrap this up. So you are able to sit up the front, Mr. Caldwell. No room. Okay. So, Mr. Mohi and then Councillor Balfour had a couple. We exhausted your question?
Well, you haven't answered the last one.
No, we're going to when we deal with the finances.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, just in case this document goes forward, the spelling of Fatuma is incorrect.
Blame me, Mr. Mohi, I thought I'd got that right.
Yeah,
But,
so,
I haven't.
no, you got a faux tumour.
Oh, AU.
And just in terms, have you considered alternatives for the forest and bird of changing the status to Māori land, and then the Crown could confiscate it?
Open to that suggestion, actually.
I don't think you're any longer in a position to speak for the Crown, Councillor Barker.
Councillor Belford, need a couple more?
Yeah, I just had three more, please. Responding to, sensitive to public concern about the earthquake risk and all that, the Board of Inquiry, as you know, said we want all this going forward to be peer-reviewed by a group of no less than 3 independent individuals. Are you able to identify those individuals to us at some point?
Yes, we are able to identify them, and I think you'll find that this council, together with the 2 other district councils involved, actually approved the appointment of the independent person.
Independent persons?
The independent engineer, which was required.
The condition is an independent panel of 3 or more individuals, and that independent panel, here's the decision, that independent panel is at this point supposed to be reviewing every aspect of the geotechnical work going forward. Does that panel exist?
Well,
and is it doing that
yes.
job?
So the first thing is the panel exists. The second thing, the panel has been approved by the consenting authorities as the regulators, the consents. And the third point is that because we're actually not doing an awful lot of geotech work, let alone detailed planning and design work or construction work, they don't have a lot to do.
You've drawn in this document, in this report, you've described the work that's been undertaken, and you draw conclusions about it, that we have soft rock, easier, blah, blah, blah. All this work was supposed to be
hang
under
on.
a review.
So my point is this.
Just everyone relax here.
My point is this, is that's a single input into a detailed planning phase. It's one issue. That's a simple statement about what the contractors found in relation to their assessment of that work. In due course, that will be reviewed by that panel, right? But that panel is not being established, and rather it's established, but it's not operative in a detailed sense because there's not enough to do. And that would be a complete actual waste of money and time to have them doing a lot right now because there's not sufficient to do. They start doing stuff when the project is properly underway.
Well, I guess I would question whether that is in the spirit of what the Board of Inquiry thought was going to unfold
That's what's
here.
happening. Anyway, next question.
So no,
Well, so you can identify the 3 people or the 3 plus people?
I can refer you to a letter dated 17th of December 2014 from the Central Hawke's Bay District Council, which approves the independent engineer to this panel. And as Andrew Newman has said, the appointment of this person to this panel, my understanding is this is entirely consistent with what is required, was approved by a working group or an overview team that had representatives of this council, Hastings District Council, and Central Hawke's Bay District Council. Let us track down the paper trail here and satisfy you on this matter.
I would appreciate that. 2 more.
Just remind the gallery to be quiet,
The
please.
business case, it appears that we're on a track to get something before the council in April, which I guess presumes that a business case has been put forward, that's been passed along to Deloitte's, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Is that what in fact we should be expecting to happen? We'll see a business case within the next
My understanding is that the financial model, which is the core of the business case, has already been provided to Deloitte's. Perhaps your chief executive can confirm that. The review of that by Deloitte's is a council matter. It is not an HBRIC matter.
Then can I direct a question to the chief executive?
Yep, sorry, Mr. Drury's not sitting alongside me right now to give you the specific dates, but the financial model has been transacted from HBRIC's advisors directly through to Deloitte for them to start their review process.
my understanding of that process was that we would get a business case, we councillors would get a business case, we would have an opportunity to flag any particular questions about it we had so that Deloitte could be responsive to any of those questions. What you're now saying is that no, we're going to get a pre-digested version of this somehow with Deloitte's recommendations. Is that what's going to happen?
Deloitte are going to be in attendance at the corporate and strategic meeting in 2 weeks' time to cover off a number of matters. It's certainly not their final report, but they will be available to have discussions with the committee.
Okay, my last question is...
Chairman, on that matter, just before you get to the last question, can I refer you to item 8.2 of your minutes of the 25th of June 2014, which sets out the definitive version of what is supposed to be undertaken here.
That's right.
Copy it. He's got a copy of that there. He can read. Last question.
The last question, in the little discussion here of Forest and Bird, it talks about acquiring the land will remain a condition subsequent. What at this stage of the game determines what you want to treat as a condition subsequent versus a condition precedent? And is this purely at your discretion? If there are 2 or 3 other things that we're not quite over that hump yet, do they become conditions subsequent? What's the conceptual difference here? How does that work?
Well, he's just read out the minute of the meeting, but if you need to repeat that. So
there are 4 clearly defined conditions precedent and other matters.
What I want to know is there an unlimited number of conditions subsequent we might anticipate?
No.
Is this one, or how does that get determined?
No, there isn't an unlimited number. As far as we're aware at the present time, the resolution of the dock land exchange is the only matter that we would be potentially treating as a condition subsequent.
Thinking if Heath could come up the front, and there was a question, one to answer from Councillor Barker about the borrowing, or somewhere where you can get hold of a microphone. Perhaps here. Oh.
And credit cards too.
Has he got a credit card? No. Why are you laughing, Heath?
Just in response to Councillor Barker's question, so of the $3 million facility, we have drawn down the first part of that in the last week. We've drawn down $1 million of that, with the remaining $2 million still to be drawn down at a future point.
Thank you. Financial questions, Councillor Pipe.
Yeah, page 35, the $700,000 cost of additional geotechnical investigations. Can I have some elaboration on that?
That was a piece of work completed between January and February, and it's been picked up and discussed with you in previous meetings, and it was the subject of a specific discussion between ourselves and yourselves around that expense and also the borrowing facility. But in simple terms, what it was a piece of geotechnical work around the diversion tunnel for the dam, and the diversion tunnel was one of the critical path issues for construction of the dam. It's one of the first things that has to be done, and therefore it's a timing and risk issue. And so the geotech work has validated the quality of the rock, the basic strength of the rock, the porosity of the rock, which in turn enables the engineers to design or actually cost and design the process around that piece of work. So that's what it did. And it kept, in large part, the reasons it kept the critical path on track at that point.
Can I just ask a supplementary question? In fact, there are 2 line items: geotech investigations 790 and additional early geotech works 700. So there's a total of 1 point whatever it is, 5 million spent on that. How much of that is necessary to meet the conditions precedent?
Oh, the vast bulk of that geotechnical expense outside of the 700K was associated with the competitive process whereby we had Bouygues, it's one constructor, the French constructor, and OHL Hawkins JV both bid for the job. That goes back a good 2 years. And at that time, basically the point around the additional geotech work at that time, that's going back to at least 2 years, was that it enabled the constructors to de-risk their bids. In other words, a lot of that geotechnical work, again, was associated with dam foundations, the stability of the foundations, the quality of the rock, all that sort of stuff, and enabled those constructors. The information was given to both of them for their own analysis, and then enabled them to optimise and design dam types which were competitively bid to us. So that's what that did. So it wasn't purely tied up with absolutely the CP, but it was tied up with the sort of competitive bids we got. Yep.
Thank you. Any further questions? Happy to move, Councillor Dick. Thank you. We have a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Hewitt. Wish to speak? Just grab your microphone. All right. Thank you.
I'd just like the directors and Mr. Newman and staff for a very thorough report and the manner and professional manner in which they've answered questions today.
Councillor Hewitt.
Thank you, and to echo the sentiments from my colleague here, Councillor Dick, I'd also like to acknowledge the work that has been undertaken by you all and your team, who I know are working flat stick in the background. It's been a pretty fraught process, especially of late, with the deadline heading down to the 18th of April. There's a tremendous opportunity here for the whole community, and I'm hugely encouraged by the work that I'm aware that you're doing, and the comms team that you've got in behind you, and the sales team. And I'd like to just acknowledge the Farmer Reference Group, who's been a very, very large part of this journey all the way through. We have all of their names listed here, and I know they are seriously large operators in the community, so there's certainly no slugs. They will be fully supportive of anyone who's potentially signing up to be approaching them and digging into any more detail. But I look forward to our next meeting. I think there's going to be a lot of water under the bridge between now and then, and yeah, good luck. Thank you.
Further speakers? Or, there's no further speakers. I'll put the motion in. Oh. No, we're going to get a report from you after that. Quickly explain it. We should move on, but quickly explain it.
Very simple terms. I'll just provide
microphone for the camera. Smile for the camera.
I don't have it in front of me. But one of the things that I noted in the report was that we're essentially distributing water to a larger area in terms of where the customer demand is. That has a cost and two benefits, and the cost is clearly we've got to extend the pipe network, and we've got to pump more water. We're going to pump water further. That's the cost effect of it, and that's in and behind the adjustment in the water price issue. So that's the point. The second point though is that it does actually have two. It does have two benefits. One is it spreads the intensified irrigated land use over a broader area, much broader footprint, and therefore that's in our view has got a real benefit from decreasing risk around nutrient issues. The second benefit is that it actually expands, ultimately that expands the customer base substantially. So if I was to give you some stats, ultimately we think we'll probably, on the basis of current land use projections, irrigate about 27,000 hectares of irrigable land. I mean, that's a much bigger area than 27,000. That's around about 90,000 hectares on that map. But in terms of irrigable land, it's about 42,000 hectares, viably irrigable land. So the scheme in terms of its total uptake curve can never irrigate that entire area, which if you're looking at it from a risk perspective, de-risks the project in terms of the uptake curve. Okay.
No questions, no. If you've got an issue, take it up with one of the directors when they join us for lunch. We're just about ready to break. We've moved and seconded, everyone's spoken. Let's move on. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. We'll be here all day. A verbal update on, and I'll invite these guys to join us for lunch, and we can question them there. Verbal update on Tongoyo. Have we got time, Mr. Chairman of that committee?